Now I'll show you my video game system collection from the 2000s. In the 2000s, the PlayStation was still looked at as very successful, didn't die out for a few more years, and the Dreamcast hung on for the first couple years of the 2000s before Sega canceled it. Now the next system to come out was the PlayStation 2. This thing allowed PlayStation 1 games to be played on it, and it had DVD playback, which the Dreamcast didn't have, and that's one reason Sega was scared to continue on in the console market. PlayStation 2's controller had the comfortable, familiar analog controllers just like the PlayStation 1 had. The Nintendo GameCube was the next to come out. Nintendo had been planning this system for quite a while. The controller is quite a bit different from many standard controllers. The shoulder buttons have an uneven number, 3 instead of 4, or 2. But it also has 2 analog sticks, and it works well. At the same time, Nintendo brought out their handheld Game Boy Advance, which had superior graphics to Game Boy Color, had good battery life, had even smaller games, and was able to even get Super Nintendo games ported to it pretty accurately. The Microsoft Xbox also came out. This system was different from these two because it actually used a hard drive instead of memory cards. The controller it came out with in the beginning was a little bit too big for most people, so they remade the controller smaller. This controller is actually pretty comfortable too. Now, the Xbox had the option of using memory cards, but it copied the Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast and had it so the memory cards would go into the controller instead of the front of the system. The PlayStation 2 still only had 2 controller ports, while the GameCube and Xbox had 4, so multiplayer was great on the Xbox and GameCube. But the PlayStation 2 had many more games, had an adapter for adding 2 extra controllers, and had a huge library of RPGs, as Sony was already becoming known for. Nintendo's strength again was its own franchises. And Xbox. Microsoft had the Halo franchise, and a few others like Fable, but not too many exclusives there. All 3 of these systems had a lot of same games by third-party developers. This is where same games by third-party developers started becoming exactly the same on each system. Many people went ahead and got all 3 systems from the beginning just so they'd be able to play all the exclusives. This trend started becoming popular here. Now, all the way in 2004, Nintendo decided to remake their Game Boy Advance with a backlit screen, a rechargeable built-in battery, and just take the same Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. This was a good step in the direction of the new technology. So a couple years later, the Nintendo DS used that rechargeable battery that added the touchscreen capabilities, Game Boy Advance backward compatibility, and use smaller games than the cartridges even, using little cards. This system has a lot of good games for it, a lot of variety. Many of them use that touchscreen. The PSP also came out around that time. It has better graphics than the DS, but different styles of games. Games that are just the normal button pushing type. The games for the PSP come on these different types of discs. They're actually a little mini disc inside of a plastic casing that protects it. Right now it's the highest graphical capable handheld, but it's getting fierce competition from the DS because the DS has so many good games. But in this day and age, it's common for people to want all the platforms. Now here's our current generation of consoles. The Xbox 360 has a lot of games for it. I don't have really any exclusives for it, I don't think, except maybe I think Forza 2 Motorsport is an exclusive racing game. This system went through a lot of hardware failures, but the Elite's a pretty sturdy system, I heard, so I bought that instead of the earlier systems. I waited a while to get my 360 because I heard about the bugs in the hardware. This has that newer chip, so it should be fine. This is the favorite system among today's hardcore gamers. Sort of like the Xbox was back then. PlayStation 3 is the best hardware when it comes to being able to play newer technology like the Blu-ray discs straight out of the box. Unlike the Xbox 360, the controllers don't take batteries, it just recharges with a cable that you plug into the USB port of the system or a computer. Again, I don't have the exclusive games for it, but I prefer buying multi-platform games for the PlayStation 3 just because I like the controller better. It's the classic PlayStation controller that we've been using for years, since the PlayStation 1. So it's nice not to abandon that familiar feel. Hopefully they start making more games for this system. I like this one quite a bit. These systems, I'm surprised they aren't as neck to neck as they should be. Of course, in Japan, the PlayStation 3 is beating this, while this is beating this over here. But who's beating this really badly right now? It's the Nintendo Wii. These things have been selling like crazy with their motion sensing technology. Play games like this instead of just this. They have all these different attachments. You can play games with the classic style controller, or you even have this thing. This even senses motion. The detachable analog stick. Now with this, Nintendo is actually where you want to go to for exclusives. They have exclusives that none of the others are going to even copy. So this generation of gaming really has variety. I'd say pick up all of it because you're going to get a completely different experience on the different systems.